Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, depending on where you are. This is the ARPA Institute panel discussion. Before we start, though, I'd like to say a few words about the ARPA Institute. First of all, everybody's welcome, and thank you for joining us. ARPA Institute has been working in Armenia for 33, 34 years now. And we are experts in various fields, and we provide expertise to the institutes, to the government of Armenia, and to the universities. We also have projects ongoing currently. Currently, actually, we have the annual invention competition for young scientists, and we received this year 12 inventions in different fields. It was evaluated by each one of them at least by three experts, and a winner was chosen. And the winning team will receive $10,000. Actually, the award ceremony will be on Monday in the Polytechnic University at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And we would like you to join if you're in Armenia, be present and encourage the young scientists over there. And we also have started a new course in the Polytechnic University related to circuit design, advanced circuit design. There are already around 120 students taking the course, and the main objective here is to provide essentially expertise in that field because, as you may know, large companies like NVIDIA, AMD, Microsoft, and others are there, and they will be needing experts in that field. And we also have established the first Class 1000 clean room in the Alekhanian National Lab. And in addition, in the National Lab, we sponsor a couple of teams in different areas. One of them is called the radio frequency photomultiplier tube, which is a device that detects laser pulses down with an accuracy of almost 1 picosecond. And that's better than what exists. And we are trying to commercialize that device. And actually, Mihran Aroyan is here. He's our commercial expert. And and then we also work with the university and other institutes, Molecular Biology Institute and many others. And so the main objective is to provide assistance in science, technology, healthcare, and many other areas. Um, Without further ado, today we have this esteemed panel of experts that are going to discuss the security of Armenia. And Hrair Cabayan is going to be the moderator. And we have already introduced Hriar. He's an expert working in the Pentagon for quite a few years, and he will be moderating the panel. Hriar,
Yeah,
please.
well, yeah, thank you, Agop. Thank you, Agop. Thank you, everybody who's joining in. I know it's very uncertain days these days, a lot going on in the world, and I'm glad you're finding a couple of hours of your time here to join in. So, thank you. Um, I just want to make sure everyone knows that this project, this white paper, this whole planning for this panel discussion was done way before the conflict in Iran. So that was not on our radar screen, as we say in the Pentagon. It was not. So do not look for insights about what's happening there because, like I said, that was not something we were concerned with. Uh, we all the panelists are very professional in their areas. You got the announcement, detailed biographies of each of the panelists. I am not going to read them. I'm sorry, it will take a lot of time. I would. So I'm assuming you read them. Now they are all very professionals. You're going to hear very different perspectives. So I'm going to ask each a question quickly to set the stage. Hopefully, I won't take more than a minute, minute and a half. And then they'll have about 10 minutes to respond. I want to add that after, in a couple of weeks, I don't know, we haven't set the date yet. We plan to hold a simulation, just as a simulation where the participants here will participate. Dr. Scott Fisher will be running that simulation, so they will be participating, of course, like this virtually. And then we have 3 scenarios we're working on, operational scenarios, and then for each scenario, each participant will represent the country they're working on, that they wrote the article upon, and they would say, okay, from this country's perspective, this is how this country will respond to a crisis like that. So I used to do a lot of those when I was in the Pentagon. They're very useful. I mean, reading the articles, what we're doing today is one key aspect of finding out what's going on in the world. But then the simulations bring insights that collectively people had not thought about. So new insights come out, gives you more perspective into what's happening in the world. And when we do that simulation, the conflict in Iran will be pretty much will have an impact on whatever we say and such. So with that, I don't want to take any more of your time. So by the way, please post your questions in the chat box. Trust me, we're going to get to them. That's very important. But I would really ask you not to try to get into the ongoing conflicts in Iran because, again, I'm repeating myself. That was not the purpose or this report that you've got, the white paper and the panel today. So we're going to start off with Tavit Akopyan. And Tavit, I have very quickly, you had a very wonderful article like everybody else. And I tried to extract from it, and I've done it for each one of the other participants, a brief statement of the key issues you raised, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to explain. So here's my take, or very brief take of your article. You state in your article, Armenia stands at the rare junction, vulnerable but facing new opportunities, isolated but increasingly visible, pressured but capable of redefining its geopolitical posture. The direction it takes toward resilience will shape the country's sovereignty for the coming decade. You go on to say, to survive in an increasingly lawless international system, Armenia must pursue a strategy of pragmatic resilience with internal consolidation combined with external diversification. David, over to you to explain to our public what you have in mind. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Hriar, and thank you, Akop, also, and thank you, all panelists. I mean, it's a great honor to join you in this discussion. So before I answer directly to your questions, right, let me give just a bit of context overview. Because the article, the one I wrote, was Armenia in the times of regional turbulence and global lawlessness. And let me explain what exactly I mean by global lawlessness and what I mean by regional turbulence, and then will come specific your questions about Armenia and our way forward. So I spent myself 3 decades, almost 3 decades, with United Nations in, I can call it broader Middle East, but which goes from Central Asia to Horn of Africa, but this part of the world. And usually the approach we had, that there is a big normal world and things happening evolutionarily, slowly growing, developing, and then here and there are certain pockets, Afghanistan, Somalia, and so on. And then you go there, you dive, you try to fix something, and then come back to the normal reality, and you enjoy assuming that the world will stay the way it was. Unfortunately, the last few years, or probably decade, things get derailed and things start to get out of control on the global level. Some people, I don't know where it started. It started maybe with Russia, some would argue, Russia annexation of Crimea, or then after Turkey, I was in Syria, when Turkey took part of Syria, as a part of their intention to exert the control on Syria in 2017. Then after more and more, so the main war against the Ukraine, 22, and then we have the United States now, which is behaving in its own specific way. Let's say Trump's ambition about the Canada, Panama, Greenland, and now the war in Iran also. So to the type of world we knew, and there is no, I mean, probably is no more there. What type of world is coming out of this, let's say, chaotic years? It's still to be seen. There are different ways. Either some people are calling it the collapsing world order or the rule of jungle, or there's also a way might makes it right. So there are different ways to call it, but whether this is like all sovereign states, big and small states equal, the UN consensus, whatever. So definitely this approach is no more working. So the next 5-10 years are probably going to be more shocks and aftershocks because when the rules disappear from the system start behaving in a very spontaneous and unpredictable way. So this is what we are facing. And this is specifically painful for Armenia. And I think probably two major shocks we also face ourselves. It was the 2020 war, and very few in Armenia were expecting that these changes in the world are going to impact Armenia so abruptly. And also the 2023, which I see that it came as an aftershock of Russian invasion in Ukraine. But again, very few were able to see that there's certain correlation, and one day it may come to us. So probably, of course, we wait to see what type of aftershocks we get from Iran, but this is a separate topic of discussion. Then we come to these regional turbulences. And the reality Armenia we are part eventually of two regions. And these two regions, each of them has its own seismic, let's say, activities. One is the post-Soviet reality, Russia, Ukraine, and the type of Russian satellite, which trying to migrate and find a new way of living. And this is painful and very hard to understand what type of shocks we are going to face, including Armenia. And the second is, of course, the Middle East. Just to elaborate a bit on Middle East and the sort of the realities I have been diving in the last 5-6 years of my UN also career, that it started with Hamas attack in Gaza or in Israel, but then after it started going farther. So it goes Hezbollah, Lebanon, Syria collapsed, and then after Turkey started getting more control in Syria. But what is happening now, and this is something we are going to witness in the next few years, this is two major alliances or two major axes are being formed. This is Israel-led, Greece, Cyprus, Ethiopia, Somaliland recently joined, India, etc. So Israel is building its own alliance. At the same time, Turkey is building its own. And Turkey, some call it Sunni NATO, so Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan, but also Qatar and some other also smaller states. Interesting enough, UAE is more part of the Israel-led alliance. So these are two axes, and one day Armenia will probably need to make some choice or decision or continue to navigate, but what ways we are going to feel pressures, and we are going to have the challenge to decide how we do this. So this is all the context. Now let's come to your specific questions. So in addition to this, just coming more to Armenia, Azerbaijan, of course, has its own. We all know, and there will be, Stephan is not here, Astourian, who wrote about Azerbaijan, but broadly, Azerbaijan has its own transformation, getting liberated from the Russian patronage, but also military victor in our war, and having just recent statements against Iran and Aliyev's, let's say, statements, and the language he's using both vis-a-vis Russia and vis-a-vis Iran is not the usual language Azeri leaders were using before. So Azeris has its own adjustment, and then our, let's say, cooperation or competition and cooperation coordination. So it's a very complex setting. we, Armenia and Azerbaijan, are in the process now. And then it came that the US-led Nerses will talk more about this. But for me, some genius mind, and frankly, it's really some admirable thing that happened on August 8th, 2025, where they brought together Trump's ego and this type of, there was Trump Tower, Trump perfume, and Trump many other things. Even Bitcoin was named after Trump, and now there is a route named after Trump. So it brought him immediately in. Biden, who was quite, we were thinking pro-Armenian, so he was not much involved. It was more up to Blinken, and here Trump considered it as a very personal, special and personal. But on top of this personality factor, there is also Azerbaijan-Nakhichevan connection. There is a transit, and in this transit, we and Armenia and Azerbaijan, we have common objectives and many other things. So our relations with Azerbaijan also undergoing through very sort of critical transformation, and how it's going to evolve, very hard to predict. But one interesting factor, and I will explain more on this, there was some London-based European Economic Research Institute, which has a forecast that by 2040, Armenia GDP per capita is going to be $24,000, almost 2.5 times more than now, and Azerbaijan will get to $12,000. So our GDP will be twice larger than Azerbaijani GDP, and this is something which I think gives us part of our new opportunities for Armenia. Now coming to the specifically your questions, right? Also like vulnerable and eventually not just vulnerable, defeated in 2020 war, but at the same time facing many new opportunities. This is opportunity with the transit route. This is opportunity to build something with Azerbaijan of global nature, the transit between sort of East and West and Europe, and we are part of this. The economic value is still to be seen, and some more analysis probably will follow on exact benefits of different sites, etc. But importantly also, Armenia made a miraculous, to me, economic transformation in the last 5 years. I was just looking the figures of the top 5, even 10, all 10 countries globally, from 21 till 25. And Armenia comes, there are a couple of, let's say, anomalies like Guyana, who got, because of the oil, I don't know, 10 times GDP has grown in a few years. But if you take the normal growing countries, Armenia together with Ethiopia, Georgia, Vietnam, and a few others, has on average 8% GDP growth in the 5 years. This is something, let's say, important. And how did it happen is something also separate, important and interesting, but this gives Armenia opportunity. If economy continue growing with the same speed or with similar speed, it gives us, let's say, extra leverage in our relations with our neighbors also. So we are, let's say, in a sense, we are isolated, as you ask in your question also, but we are visible. And this isolation comes from the fact that we are not NATO member, we are not CSTO member, we are non-member of any formal alliance where we have a patron and a big, let's say, protector. And the process of us migrating to US umbrella will take many years. I think US has 30 NATO member allies and there's another 30 non-NATO members. But our way, maybe in the next 5-10 years, probably this is objective we have to look for. Just try to conclude now when we say this. So in this lawless international system, Armenia resilience and how Armenia resilience could help us to survive. As I said, this internal consolidation and also internal mobilization. And when I speak internal consolidation, I mean many very practical things. It is about state and church relations, trying to understand what goes beyond these relations. It is about relations between science, research, technology, economy, industry, how to consolidate. It is about diaspora and Armenian population, and most people here, I think, who are, let's say, participating are from diaspora, but they're equally interested and have a stake in Armenia future. I remember Shimon Peres in one of his interviews, he said, we had terrible fights with Bibi Netanyahu in parliament, but when we finish our discussions, we go and have dinners and talk about the nation's future. Unfortunately, so far, we are not there. And the second, probably the last point, is this external diversification. There is a lot of happening there. And I think diversification coming out from this Russian umbrella, building relations, I don't know, from Uruguay, Argentina, to Emirates, to India, to Vietnam, to wherever, huge work. But for me, the building relations with the nations is not just signing papers with them. It is like between human beings. Relations are about mutual trust. It is about, let's say, history having together. It's about economic interest, etc. So on all these fronts, there is a huge work we need to do to make sure this diversification becomes a productive thing and helps us to navigate through, let's say, the next 5-10 years of probably even more accelerated turbulences we are collectively going to face. I will stop here. I think I exhausted my time. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, David, for these very insightful comments. Let me remind our listeners, please post your questions. We're going to get to them at the end. And so our next participant is Dr. Nerses Kopalyan. Many of you know Nerses. Anytime I open up any Armenian publication, there's an article by Nerses. So Nerses, I want to thank you for all the effort you put into this. So very good. So most of you, I'm sure, have read Nerses' article, but just to set the stage, I'm going to read a brief statement here, raising some issues you may want to address. So, okay, Nerses, you state in your article, the Washington summit was the culmination of months of negotiations between U.S., Armenia, and Azerbaijan that culminated with the accords. And in parentheses, I want to remind everybody, Nerses was involved in those negotiations. The TRIP implementation framework envisions America's regional objectives of securing open communication, trade, and connectivity in the South Caucasus to promote peace, stability, and prosperity. You also state the contours of TRIP are not temporary U.S. policy, but an institutionalized grand strategy. This in turn serves as an enhancement qualifier for Armenia's nascent security architecture and the stabilizing role that vested U.S. interests play in the region. Nerses, over to you. Please explain.
Thank you, Hrair. Appreciate organizing this talk by ARPA, and happy that so many people have joined. Basically, this entire discussion of TRIP and the US-led normalization process was predicated on a very single logic. In March, the United States came into the picture more actively and realized that Azerbaijan was using this so-called corridor logic that was born out of the trilateral statement, the 2020 trilateral statement that brought about the ceasefire between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which was also included Russian involvement. And the trilateral statement basically had the complete corridorization logic, the extraterritoriality logic. The whole structure was that Armenia would have almost no control or presence in the entirety of the center of its own country, and that Russian troops would control the corridor, and Azerbaijan would have whatever access that it wants, impeded and some. The Washington Accords categorically changed that. But the issue at hand was that Armenia was opposed to the way that Azerbaijan and Moscow were interpreting the trilateral statement. And Aliyev's position was obviously the following: if I don't get the terms of the trilateral statement as I envision it, I reserve myself the right to invade. So when the United States came into the picture, the situation was that Azerbaijan was using the corridor premise as a justification to use force. And this is where America's thinking was based on two main precepts. One, their logic was peace first, in the sense that you stop the probability or the propensity of violence, of war. And second, you move the conflict from the domain of the battlefield to the domain of normalization. And so the logic of TRIP was to completely alter the coordination postulate and propose and bring about something that did require a little bit of creative thinking, but at the same time addressing the interconnectivity issue and bringing United States into the project. So this was the initial logic that gave away to TRIP. And the US intention at this point was to establish normalization, stability in the South Caucasus, and of course, re-enhance what America considers to be its new dominant position in the South Caucasus. Now, when we look at the developments of TRIP, sadly, and I have to kind of mention this, there was so much disinformation in the diasporan news ecosystem, primarily led by the likes of Artin, Iskandaryan, the ARF, the Dashnak Tutum, that led a lot of confusion in the diaspora as to what TRIP was. And needless to say, the shortcomings of Armenia's government's capacity for strategic communication did not help the process. So there's a lot of confusion and a lot of conspiracy theories, speculations on TRIP. And that has obviously led to a lot of misunderstandings, be that as it may. What I want to mostly talk about is not the specifics of TRIP with respect to the economic components of it or the financial aspects of it. That's a separate subject of conversation. What is important to Armenia right now with respect to what I just addressed and the TRIP project and the signings of the Washington Accords is that it altered Armenia's security architecture. Armenia went from fearing invasion any given day to post-August 8, where the probability of Azerbaijan invading Armenia exponentially diminished. It's not completely alleviated, but in the domain of probability, it has exponentially diminished. And that is fundamental to one's security architecture. Second, by virtue of Russia being a diminished hegemon, Russia no longer is the hegemon in the South Caucasus. They're an important actor, most definitely, but they are not the reigning power actor in the region. So the United States has stepped in. With the United States stepping in right now and assuming the position of regional hegemon, the geopolitical system of the South Caucasus has shifted. And whenever you have regional systemic change, that affects the behavior of the actors in that system. It is precisely for this reason that Azerbaijan is behaving the way it's doing under the new geopolitical system, where its behavior is restrained, less aggressive, and bellicosity has slowed down. Then compared to the prior Russia-led system, where we all remember what Azerbaijan was doing. So systemic and structural change at the geopolitical level, which was brought about by the Washington Accords and the TRIP project, fundamentally altered Armenia's security architecture. So we approached this through that lens. Now, this does not mean that Armenia's security issues have been resolved, but what it means is that we have been able to develop a multi-tiered soft deterrence model that makes it that much harder for Aliyev to do what he wants to do. It doesn't mean he's being completely deterred, but as I noted, when we look at data prior to August 8, prior to deeper US Western engagement, and after, the evidence speaks for itself. And this is why we speak of Armenia's nascent security architecture being enhanced by virtue of these developments. Now, to the point of US strategic interest in the South Caucasus, clearly what we're talking about with this project, with TRIP, that it was somehow a, top of the mind, a development that Trump woke up one morning and, the idea came about. No, the contours of what became TRIP was actually proliferated under the Biden administration. So the idea of US investing in infrastructure, in interconnectivity, and this in of itself bringing about stabilization and then eventually peace, the idea was developed under the Biden administration. The difference is that the Biden administration's attempt and strategy in making this happen was very different than how the Trump administration went about. The Biden administration had a similar model, but their whole objective was that we were going to engage in positive reinforcement. That simply means incentivizing Aliyev to agree. So the Biden administration refused from any escalatory behavior. And that simply was not enough of an incentive for Aliyev to agree. When the Trump administration came in, the Trump administration has no reservations in using escalation as an important negotiating tool. And thus, the Trump administration's position was quite different. In the domain of incentivizing Azerbaijan, the Trump administration basically said, either you agree or there are going to be consequences. And when you speak to Aliyev and basically authoritarian regimes through that lens, their behavior shifts. So when the new hegemon in the region is imposing a new system of geopolitical engagement that stipulates or expects certain outcomes, that changes the behavior of the actors in that system. In this case, of course, the actors being countries. So to answer that question of institutional continuity, consider the fact that this concept was around with the prior administration and continued with much revisions and implemented with the current administrations demonstrates institutional continuity. Also, those of you who are involved in this or know, I'm consistently in DC, where there's conversations with state, with National Security Council at the White House, with the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, on Capitol Hill. This is not a partisan issue. Even Democrats support TRIP. They might not like the name, but they support the initiative. So the assumption that after Trump leaves, a potential Democratic administration would somehow renege or deem void this agreement simply counters American strategic interests. And finally, when we talk about, I don't want to take too much space, when we talk about, the institutional continuity of this and the importance for the United States, and therefore why the United States continues to have vested interests regardless of administration, this is a very unique example of low investment, high geopolitical dividends that the US is accruing. Generally speaking, when a major power seeks to establish regional dominance or presence, this requires political capital, economic capital, diplomatic capital, and a lot of times military capital. The United States does not need to utilize all of those diverse forms of capital to simply become the dominant actor in the South Caucasus. So from their perspective, it was strategically a very low cost mechanism of becoming dominant in the region. Now, the fact that this aligns with Armenia's interests, therein lies the secret. The objective was to engage in mutual alignment of interest to make this a reality. And it was precisely why we worked so hard on the policy of diversification and de-risking relations with Russia while pivoting west to align interests. And so the security architecture that we're seeing right now that is slowly being built is a byproduct of this. And finally, we have to talk about the middle corridor, the Trans-Caspian route. For the United States, TRIP is one part of that project. That means this is a very grand strategy and not administration specific. So regardless of who comes after Trump, the Trans-Caspian route, that middle corridor matters to the United States. It matters to connect Asia to Europe, and Armenia being integrated in this is a very, very important part of that. So this is not a one-off singular project in of itself. But again, the economics are a separate conversation. I'm trying to explain how we were able to integrate these developments into Armenia's security architecture. And finally, two very quick points. When the administration views the South Caucasus in the domain of priority, it has become relevant for this administration because of Trump's personal sentiments. We can't disregard that. However, noting the amount of investment that the United States is injecting into the project, post-Trump administrations will also be incentivized to maintain this, not simply for the reasons I've provided, by virtue of the fact that it's in America's strategic interest to have a presence in the South Caucasus. And interestingly so, the US has anchored this in its mutual alignment of interests with Armenia. So when we look at sort of the confluence of these developments, right, whether the economic components of this meet expectations or not, there's a lot of projective modeling to be done, and I'll leave that to economists and those who engage in econometrics. I'm not going to debate the merits of that. But when it comes to the domain of security, The fact that the region is embroiled in the conflict that it's embroiled in, and Aliyev has not fired a single bullet at Armenia, whereas in the past, this would have been a dream scenario for him to utilize force. It's a very, very important indicator of how the geopolitical system has been restructured and how Armenia's security architecture has been enhanced. Now, I'm not saying the probability of Aliyev doing something aggressive is inconceivable. No, of course not. There are no silver bullets to what we're doing. But when we trace the empirical developments, right, what we see is a robust track record of positive security developments for Armenia. Now, the objective is to build on that and to enhance deterrence capacity, not simply in the domain of soft power, or for us to fall back into the thinking of who's going to be our new patron. Okay, remember that savior complex is going to save us? You can't do that. One. Two, as David noted, right, external diversification. The more partners you have, the more external investments that you have, right, the more important you become to other parts of the world. And the more interested others are to you and more vested interest they have to you, the more relevant you have become as a regional actor. So it is a multi-tiered complex process of both building a security architecture, integrating Armenia to regional and subcontinental projects, while at the same time diversifying the large number of partners and strategic partnerships, the concept of multi-alignment that is going to allow us to address our security issues. So collectively, we view TRIP, right, as being one important part of this. And finally, the second point, the United States does not consider TRIP as a singular development. Anyone who's been speaking to this administration knows that TRIP is a pilot. They have plans of TRIP 2, TRIP 3, those kinds of projects, both in Central Asia and possibly in the Middle East, where they utilize this model of interconnectivity, trade, and commerce to produce stability, while at the same time making the United States the most influential actor through this project. So the TRIP pilot in of itself is part of a broader project. And that's why it suggests continuity regardless of administration, because it's a broad institutional process. So I think I'll stop here and I'll be happy to answer any questions later on.
Nerses, thank you very much. A lot of good points. I hope you guys captured the key points. I just want to repeat to everybody, this thing is being recorded. You will be able to, Hagop will send it out to everybody. Send it to your network. Those who may not have participated today, and so let's move on. Our next panelist is Alexander Iskandaryan, and Alexander, I'm going to very quickly read my key points from your article, which I'm hoping everybody has read. There's a lot of insights, by the way, in all 9 articles in this white paper that Hagop mailed out. So Alexander, in your article, you state, whatever the outcome of its war with Ukraine, Russia is like, now your focus, by the way, is on Russia. You took the Russia analysis for this white paper. Russia is likely to lay claim to its sphere of influence in the former USSR. Very important point. However, there are limits to what it can do. Its influence in the region has diminished significantly, and there are no tools in sight that can bring it back. No tools in sight that can bring it back. You make 2 key observations. One, had the Kremlin truly aimed to remain the #1 external player in the region, allowing Azerbaijan to recapture Nagorno-Karabakh has been a disaster in the light of that aim. Okay? Point #1. Also, Russia, very important point, Russia is home to the world's largest Armenian diaspora and is likely to continue meddling in the relations between the 2 countries. And by the way, the second statement is key for us who are watching the upcoming elections in Armenia. Alexander, over to you. Please expand. You are muted.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, it is very easy to answer your first question or comment the first thesis about Russia and Russian place, Russian structure of South Caucasus and structure or Russian impact on South Caucasus. Answer is yes. Yes. If I would use the phrase of Boulet de la Meurthe in Napoleon time, he said that this is more than crime. This is mistake. That was mistake, because you cannot change Armenia on Azerbaijan. I mean from Russia, looking from Moscow. After 2020, second Nagorno-Karabakh war, 2022, beginning of Russian-Ukrainian war, 2023, deportation of ethnically Armenians from NK, and 2024, withdrawing of Russian troops, I mean peacekeepers, from Nagorno-Karabakh, they lost their instrument, their tool to impact on South Caucasus, because this instrument was Nagorno-Karabakh. Even not just people, ethnic Armenians living there, but the entity, non-recognized, but entity, Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, Artsakh, if you wish. So when they lost it, they lost the center, the key instrument to impact on both Armenia and Azerbaijan. Before that, if you wanted to be the region, if you want to impact to Armenia, you need Azerbaijan. If you want to impact to Azerbaijan, you need Armenia. Now you don't have it. So in sphere of security, and they were monopolists of security in South Caucasus, and both countries, both Azerbaijan and Armenia, they needed them. Generally speaking, Russian Federation usually uses just two really tools to impact on countries of post-Soviet space. First is prices of energy supplies, prices of gas. And second, maybe first, is security. Azerbaijan did not need and does not need energy supply. They have it. It's not about Azerbaijan. And both countries needed security from Russia. Now they don't, both. So yes, it was a mistake. Yes, they lost the key instrument for them in sphere of security. But trying to explain the second thesis, I would say first, it's not just about diaspora. Yes, the largest Armenian diaspora in the world is in Russian Federation. But I would say that, when people from the West, from United States, for example, looking at this, at Armenian diaspora in Russia, their vision usually that it should be something like you have another diasporas in the world, in France, in the United States, with traditional lobbyings, with organized structures, with organizations, sometimes political parties. You have nothing like that in Russia. You don't have traditions of lobbyings. You don't have legal lobbying in Russia. I would say you have diaspora as an entity. You have diasporas. Because one thing is Armenian population of Krasnodarsky Krai, Black Sea, which is very old, more than about 200 years, people who living there already 200 years. You have Rostov diaspora, where you have very old diaspora people who are living there for 300 years. And you have people who came to, let's say, Moscow and St. Petersburg and other cities and towns of Russian Federation just 20 years ago, and they are not post-genocide diaspora. They came from Armenia, from NK, from Azerbaijan, sometimes from Abkhazia, from Uzbekistan, by economic reasons. And you have people who are living in capitals of Russia, Moscow and St. Petersburg, for several generations, who are part of Russian society. Usually they don't speak Armenian already. They live there for a long time, etc. So you have several bodies, several entities there, and you really don't have something to unite all these people in one entity. But Russian Armenian ties, Russian Armenian impact of Russian on Armenia it's not just about diaspora. In first part, I said you about strategy, about security, but Russia is a country which is larger than Armenia by population 50 times, 50, which is bigger than Armenia 600 times, 600, which is close to Armenia, which is former metropolis. You have, I don't know, thousands of ties connecting Russia with Armenia. For example, geography. You cannot change Upper Lars. Upper Lars is a point on the border between Georgia and Russia, where you cross border from Armenia through Georgia to Russia. You cannot change this Upper Lars to another Lars, which goes not to Russia, but to, I don't know, Belgium. You cannot do it. You cannot change Russian market to another market for Armenian goods. You cannot change a lot of things, and Russia will be player in South Caucasus, both in Azerbaijan, in Armenia, and in Georgia, even if they will decide that they will, I don't know, establish a isolationist politics. But nevertheless, they will be part of the region. Just they will not be part of the region in sphere of security. They already are not monopolists on security in South Caucasus. This is done. But ties, communications, etc., it will be part of reality, that it will be more complicated than just cutting from everything, and you will have this connection with Russian Federation, and diaspora included to these connections. Thank you. I'll stop here.
All right, thank you so much. Let's move on. Our next, before I do that, all the bios, you should have all their bios. I'm not reading them. They're in the report. Please read the report that Hagop sent out and start posting your questions. We're going to get to them at the end. And this, by the way, the session, I'm repeating, the session is being recorded, so you plan to send it to your network. So our next participant is Anna Gevorgyan. And Anna, I am so happy you were able to make it. I had concerns she's traveling, and I thought, oh, wow, what if the plane gets stranded or this and that? But she's with us, and I think you're in Denver, Anna, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Enjoy the, probably it's cold in Denver right now, I would think, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, Anna, in your article, I'm going to read it very briefly. You have a very great article. Please read Anna's article. She's our go-to person when it comes to issues regarding Iran. So in your article, you state Iran's approach, again, folks, sorry, this was written way before the conflict, right? So keep that in mind. So don't judge everything by what happened the last 5-6 days. In your article, you state Iran's approach to the South Caucasus reflects several core national security priorities, and its current regional policy is situated at a crossroads marked by economic crisis, political fragmentation, uncertain leadership dynamics, and escalating tensions. You go on to point out that Iran's risk for Armenia's security, that Iran's internal instability and external confrontation pose significant risks for Armenia's security environment. You conclude by stating, for Armenia, all scenarios underscore the importance of routes and reinforcing diplomatic engagement with all major actors involved in Iran's trajectory. Anna, over to you. You have lots to talk about.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Hrair. Thanks for your all efforts. I'm happy to make it, to participate in this discussion concerning the weather in Denver. It's as turbulent, as unpredictable as global geopolitical situation. The day before yesterday was a sunny day with 20 degrees Celsius, and yesterday was snowing. So very parallel situation with our global developments. So when it comes to my article, I did refer to the possibility of yet another war in Iran, and that was because of the developments we had last year during the June strikes on Iran. And I, in my article, wrote about different kind of scenarios Iran could have with the very harsh economic situation in Iran, protests erupted in the late December, and also overall crisis of also power structure. When it comes to the transition of power in Iranian context, now, of course, we have a situation when the leader of Iran was shot by the USA and Israel, but because he was 86-year-old and because there was a huge demand for the transformation in the political system internally in Iran, so it was already predictable that it can be a scenario where Iran must decide in which direction this kind of transformation will go. And I refer to several kind of possibilities there. One is the possibility to broaden the political tools of those institutions that are democratically elected. So, of course, in Iranian context, we must put this in a way that all of us understand that these are not democratically per se, but as Karim Sajjadpour says about the presidential elections in Iran, they are unfair, unfree, but unpredictable. So this kind of characteristic of some of the institutions in Iran had given the opportunity to the public to engage in elections and decide whether the politics will be a continuation of this hard approach or changing and having some reformists over there. The second scenario I was referring in the article was another confrontation with the USA. so another military escalation, especially given the context of the protests in Iran. We remember that during the protests, President of USA declared that help will be help is in the way to come to the Iranian protesters. Of course, when you declare such things, it means that protesters, even in more numbers, are comfortably enough to go on the streets and demand some changes in the government. And what we saw was just a brutal oppression of the protesters. I want to mention that this is not the only case when Iranian protesters demand some kind of help from outside. During the 2009 protests of Green Movement, where protesters were demanding and asking, where is my vote? Namely, still not questioning the legitimacy of the political system itself, but questioning the fairness of the elections. Even at that period, protesters were demanding some kind of help coming from the USA, namely political statements, and some political and economic pressure also on the authorities. But this time, as we see, we have this scenario of yet another military escalation and strikes. It's very difficult for me to focus only on the article I have written for the white paper and not to have some parallels what we have now. So the main concern I had during writing of the paper was that all the scenarios have numerous security implications also for Armenia's security. As Mr. Kopalyan already mentioned, this TRIP project was interpreted and manipulated a lot, not only internally in Armenian context, but this manipulation had also aimed to give a probability of misinterpretation also from outside. And we had some kind of signs coming from Iranian side that they will not tolerate this kind of economic projects. And of course, there were also concerns when it came to Armenia-Iran relations. But I mentioned in my article that already when discussing Iran's approach to the Armenia-US relations, there was already dual political approach coming from Iranian side. We had different opinions coming from the President Pezeshkian and Foreign Minister Arakchi, and very harsh comments coming from the advisor of Ali Khamenei, Velayati. So in explaining that, I was mentioning also that it's very important to understand which are Iran's political and strategic interests in our region. Unfortunately, during the years when we were speaking about the importance of relations between Armenia and Iran, we had lack of underlining the important facts that our interests coincided in several fields, but when it came to Iran's approach to the West and Iran's approach to Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, our interests weren't coincided. So this not having an opportunity to discuss these differences, it created even more surprising, I can say, explanations coming from Armenian side why Iran had the statements it had during the Nagorno-Karabakh Second War and afterwards. And also when it came to the Iran's interest not to have third parties involved in the South Caucasus, we were not mentioning also that In that case, it was also about Turkey's involvement in South Caucasus. And so from my perspective, it was obvious that at least for the political leaders of Iran who want to have some kind of relations, normalized relations with the West, it's better to have normalized relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan and having economic projects and having stability in the region than having another escalation in the South Caucasus and having even more presence of Turkey in the region. So in that case, I totally agree with Mr. Kopalyan that now, for example, when we have this escalation between Iran and Azerbaijan, especially in Nakhichevan region, it would be much more difficult for Armenia to deal with the security consequences of this kind of development if we didn't have August 8 declaration and also didn't have some kind of relations, I can say already, between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So phone calls during these days, I guess, are more important than just sitting and waiting what kind of consequences this can have on Armenia's security. When it comes to this transition period, I noted in my article that the most dangerous scenario for Armenian security is fragmentation in Iranian political context and also possibility of having different political centers and demands for the self-determination of different also national minorities. There is still such kind of concern in Iranian context. And I think that in this regard, the interests of USA and Israel also diverge. If USA has a proper strategy when they started this war, or like Ali Vaez put it in one of the discussions, maybe it's inshallah strategy only. So starting and let's see what happens. In this scenario, it's the worst scenario for Armenia's security because involving Kurds in this kind of operation, or even maybe Azeris living in Iran, this will create more and more layers for the security concerns for Armenian context. But again, coming back to the different interests when it comes to overall global security and global affairs between Armenia and Iran, it's very important for me to mention that pro-Western, if not pro-Western, but at least not anti-Western Iran will be very much in the interest of security of Armenia, of course. But during all these years of independent Armenia, we were speaking about the unacceptability of changing the overall strategy of foreign policy in our neighborhood, and that the change will definitely have only bad consequences for Armenia. I guess this kind of approach, of course, comes from the Moscow's viewpoint, because as several researchers are pointing, for Russia, it's better to have radicalized, even with nuclear power, Iran than having pro-Western Iran. But again, we don't have an experience of having democratic transition in the Middle East. And I see huge risks because of these strikes in Iran. So the transition of power in Iran, if it will last longer than several weeks, it will become more and more dangerous to have not the democratic transition in Iran, but some kind of military transition there. meaning that IRGC may be weaker than before in the Middle East and outside of Iran, but it's still very important player in Iran, inside Iran, and they are the main possible power to succeed after the religious system will collapse. But my understanding of the USA's overall interest in Iran is not the regime change per se, but strategic orientation change of Iran. And so during last year, President Trump was also already speaking about next religious leader and that he must be involved in electing him. This means preserving the system, but changing the foreign policy strategy of Iran. Of course, the changing of foreign policy strategy will, in mid-term, mean also the changing overall logic of the system, and it will definitely, in long-term, result in a system change itself. But in these days, I guess, even in Washington, in different think tanks, there is an understanding that speaking about regime change, it will not result in a democratic transition, but it can result to have yet another, maybe Pakistan in the Middle East. But I wanted to refer also to one comment concerning Washington's global strategy of having different kind of trips in different regions. Also, I just remembered that, just to remind that before Islamic Revolution, Iran was not only the main strategic partner of USA, but also very important economic partner of Israel and oil and gas provider of Israel. And when we assume now the situation, Israel's main provider of gas is Azerbaijan, and it's through Turkey. And of course, this is a concern for Israel. So having another pipeline connecting Iran and Israel, of course, will be also very important strategy. And also concerning Mr. Akopyan's comment on the different alliances in the Middle East with the center of Turkey and Israel. I like very much this definition of Abrahamic alliance versus Islamic alliance. And of course, this also impacts how Israel and USA are seeing the future of the Middle East, because having more powerful Turkey in the region, I don't think is in the interest of Israel, but Israel can target Turkey just after the operation in Iran will end. But for USA, it will be a very difficult scenario, considering that Turkey is a NATO member. So I will stop here and will be very happy to answer the questions also. Thank you.
Well, Anna, thank you very much. Everybody, as Anna said, please post your questions. Hopefully we'll get to them at the end. So our next participant, panelist, is Stephan Astourian. Many of you know him. He used to be here a professor at UC Berkeley, and he's now at AUA, and his bio is in the thing. So let me very quickly read the key issues Stephan raises in his article that I'm hoping you will all read. So Stephan, in your article, you state that what is happening in the South Caucasus should be understood within the broader context as one conflict amongst many others, and you go on to observe that all the agreements that have been signed should be looked at with modesty. You point out the peace treaty enjoins that parties condemn intolerance, racial hatred and discrimination, separatism, violent extremism, and terrorism in all their manifestations. You go on to conclude by listing several issues that make predictions difficult, namely outside actors and internal political challenges. Much will depend on the degree of influence Washington is willing to exert on Azerbaijan and Turkey. Stephan, over to you. Please explain to our audience.
Thank you, Hrair. Hello, everybody. So my article is a little bit long. I will try to sum up some of the points. It relies on power relations and the way I was trained in France, we like to read documents very closely and draw some conclusions from that reading. The first point is that we live in a period where tensions are proliferating, including wars, Syria, Ukraine, Iran, economic tensions, Trump tariffs, claims over Greenland, Canada, the US national security strategy, distancing the US seemingly from Europe, and so on. A French scholar who is the director of the French Institute of International Relations published a book, a very interesting one, L'accélération de l'histoire, the acceleration of history. And this is what we are witnessing, a little bit like the second half of the 1930s. A lot of things are happening at the same time. And in that context, it would seem that there is a focus on what he calls geostrategic nodes, specific areas, some very specific, some larger, the South China Sea, the Arctic, the Black Sea region, various straits, Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, Malacca, and especially what we could call corridors, by referring to the Azerbaijani version of the route across Sunik. And this trip has to be viewed in that context. Dr. Kopalyan mentioned that it is part of a larger project reaching up to Central Asia. So one should take a broader perspective when analyzing this. The second point, one should not lose sight of key factors. Azerbaijan and especially Turkey are much more important for the West, the US and the EU than Armenia. That is beyond doubt. In addition, Armenia is the defeated party, eager to sign a peace treaty, in a rush actually to sign a peace treaty for various reasons, security, but also re-elections in Armenia. So internal politics and international politics here are somehow overlapping. And in that context, Azerbaijan and Turkey have no particular reason to be in a rush to sign anything. Now, let's look at the documents, the peace document with its, I think, 17 articles. And then the agreement with Mr. Rubio defining more precisely the contours of the trip project. The first document reflects the positions of Azerbaijan before trip. And then suddenly, when trip came up, Azerbaijan's position became schizoid, as mentioned earlier. Talk about peace outside Azerbaijan and continuation of very antagonistic, hateful speech and policies within Azerbaijan addressed toward. Okay? An article was published 2 days ago in EVN report led by Dr. Kopalyan, which is very telling. Without that data, I myself mentioned that actually various themes, anti-Armenian themes, have been proliferating in Azerbaijan after TRIP. This is the situation in which we are. The peace treaty, at first sight, even for a somewhat educated person who has a general idea of what's going on, looks quite innocuous, mentioning territorial integrity, this and that, rejection of racism, recognition of borders, all kinds of very nice things. The only problem is that many of its clauses have already been breached by Azerbaijan. And let me mention just some of them. But prior to that, I should add that not only is Azerbaijan the stronger party in this relationship, but it has also what amounts to the security guarantee of Turkey, the Shusha Declaration, whereas Armenia has no security guarantee from anybody. So that also has to be kept in mind. There is a massive imbalance between the two sides. The peace treaty lays down principles, recognitions of the boundaries between the Soviet Socialist Republic of the former USSR, the Alma-Ata Declaration, exclusion of territorial claims. The parties will refrain from intervening into each other's affairs. Rejection of racist and so on speech, and so forth. Now let's look at some details. Right now, Azerbaijan, based on one or two publications, one of them is quasi-official. It's basically answering an article published by a significant institute in Europe, where it was mentioned that Azerbaijan occupies Armenian territories. The answer published by the Hrair Institute, which is quasi-official, I mean, these are not independent scholars at all, basically states very clearly that the Alma-Ata Declaration defining the borders of the republics, it doesn't define borders, it refers to administrative borders. So the official borders between the post-Soviet republics are not defined. So this in itself basically undermines the recognition of the Alma-Ata Declaration, or at least puts it into question. It is very unclear whether Azerbaijan will still rely on such an approach during the delimitation process of the border. That one will take probably decades. For the time being, there are about 12.7 kilometers that have been demarcated and delimited. The second thing that has been breached is the claim that the parties, it's Article 2 of the peace treaty, have confirmed that they do not have any territorial claims to each other and will not raise such claims in the future. The theme of Western Azerbaijan that has been proliferating over the past 2 years in Azerbaijan is essentially an irredentist claim referring to the homeland of these Azerbaijanis, okay, to the great return of refugees to Azerbaijan. Notice the word refugees to Azerbaijan. Before trip, this was couched in very aggressive terms and threatening terms. Once trip, the project appeared, the whole thing was now couched in humanitarian terms, with President Aliyev mentioning that from a humanitarian perspective, these Azerbaijani could just return to Azerbaijan pretty much by car. I am not exaggerating. I have the precise definition, quotation here. For a long time, the Armenian government and its experts have claimed that this is for internal consumption in Azerbaijan, for the Azerbaijani populace. There is nothing to worry about that. However, the latest report of Armenia's Foreign Intelligence Service views this campaign with some concerns and takes it seriously. Another article has been breached, Article 4, which states that the parties shall refrain from intervening with the internal affairs of each other. Well, it thus happens that Azerbaijan expects Armenia's constitution to be modified before signing the peace treaty it itself initialed. That's fully intrusion into the other party's internal life. Actually, if one looks at the Azerbaijani constitution and its reference to a particular foundational document, which is the document claiming that it is a successor of the first Azerbaijani Republic. Azerbaijan doesn't view itself as the successor of Soviet Azerbaijan, unlike Armenia, that in its constitution claims to be the successor of the Soviet Armenian Republic. It views itself as the successor of the first Azerbaijani Republic of 1918 to April 1920, whose territorial claims, let me look at that, included, among other things, the Yerevan province, including Nakhichevan, Sharur Daralagyaz, Surmeli, New Bayazid, Echmiadzin, being Gumri, and so on. President Aliyev is on record referring to Western Zangezur, that is Sunnik, that is, in his view, it's Azerbaijan. And all those claims are rooted in the view that real Azerbaijan is much larger than Soviet Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has also claims on Georgia, Dagestan, and naturally on northwestern Iran. Article 8 of the peace treaty enjoins that the parties condemned and shall combat intolerance, racial hatred, discrimination, separatism, violent extremism, and so on. I believe most of you, I saw some of the names, are aware of the massive campaign of Armenophobia in Azerbaijan. It continues without diminishing in any way. That also breaches this. But notice the reference to separatism. This is a warning to Armenia not to talk too much about Karabakh and to keep the Karabakh Seas a little bit under control. There is also another article that can be manipulated anytime about missing people from the wars, where now it is there is a claim that justice should be done about that, and Aliyev is also on the record that this is something that international law, forbids. So they have put there a little landmine that they can put into action if need be. Actually, they organized an international conference about that topic. To sum up, the peace treaty doesn't include all the real clauses required for peace. For a very simple reason, the condition sine qua non that the Armenian constitution should be changed is not part of the peace treaty. And there are indications that there are other such things. Now, the document pertaining, signed with President Trump, pertaining to the first sketch of TRIP, not the more detailed one with Secretary of State Rubio, refers to unimpeded connectivity between the main part of the Republic of Azerbaijan and the Nakhichevan Autonomous Republic through the territory of the Republic of Armenia, with reciprocal benefits for international and interstate connectivity for the Republic of Armenia. Now, unimpeded connectivity is quite clear overall. Benefits is more in the eyes of the beholder. And Prime Minister Pashinyan had mentioned that he was relying on 4 principles to sign any agreement. One of those principles was reciprocity and equality. The different wording of this segment of that document puts into question the reciprocity side part of that statement. Now, things changed immediately after this document, and the rhetoric from Azerbaijan changed. Outside Azerbaijan, they claim peace is essentially established, everything is fine, we have to work together, and so on. Inside Azerbaijan, the rhetoric is totally different. And here we have that divided, what I call schizoid position, documented by the article, by the way, published in EVN report 2 days ago.
Stephan, please, a couple more minutes. We need to go on.
Absolutely, absolutely. I will just mention one or two points from the document about TRIP, outlining some of the details of TRIP. Front office, Armenians in the back office, Armenian sovereignty on the territory. Armenia is going to check. More than 70% of it US, 24% or something Armenia, so minority position. There are a couple of issues that not automatically concern, but deserve some attention. For example, reference to sensitive issues and reserve matters that will have to be dealt with through the Armenia-US Steering Committee. what those reserve matters are, sensitive issues are is a bit unclear. The second issue is a reference to private operational security personnel to be employed subject to Armenian licensing if Armenia has sovereignty over that area. Okay? One wonders why there is need for a private security company. At any rate, all of this is good, but there are unknowns. I mentioned the unknowns in my essay. It was before the war. What if there is a US or US-Israeli attack on Iran, which leads also to military retortion against Azerbaijan? So we are not far from this right now.
Okay.
What
Great.
if Prime Minister Pashinyan's party fails to win in the June 2026 parliamentary elections? It's quite unlikely, I would say. What if the referendum on the new constitution leads to its rejection? What if TRIP is finally finalized legally before such a rejection and peace is not concluded? And a number of other things. People seem to dismiss Russia very quickly. But Russia can be a comeback kid also historically. Well, I would like to refer people to the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which gave up a lot of territories in Eastern Europe, and then they took everything back and more after the Second World War.
We gotta keep.
Bottom line, this article is written, as mentioned in its introduction, from the perspective of prudence that many people, Machiavelli, de Callière, who has written probably the first most important treatise on diplomacy, emphasize. One has to be prudent. One has to be also modest about some of the documents. That doesn't mean one has to be pessimistic. Not everything will go wrong or is bound to go wrong, but there are many landmines and problems that could emerge along the way.
Stephan,
that was my message.
Stephan, thank you very much. We're gotta move on. So our next participant. Thank you, by the way, Stephan. Our next participant.
By the way, you'll excuse me. It's midnight here almost. So.
Yeah. Okay.
I am going to go to bed. Yeah.
Okay. Hriar Balian is our final participant. Very quickly, Hriar, in your article, you state upfront that Armenia has expanded its international relations by diversifying its partners beyond traditional reliance on Russia, with a particular focus on strengthening ties with the United States, European Union, France, and India. You point out Armenia's economy has grown significantly in recent years. You identify several geopolitical challenges that Armenia faces: modernizing its military, building robust state institutions, improving its relations with its immediate neighbors. You conclude by stating, in the next decade, Armenia can expect a future with both economic opportunities and persistent geopolitical challenges. Please explain. Over to you, Hriar.
Thank you, Hriar. And thank you very much all for organizing this panel. I know how much work, and the white paper, I know how much work went into doing it. I'll focus on 3 points in my discussion. One, the importance, the last point that you mentioned, the importance of improving Armenia's relations with its neighbors in a very, very fraught geopolitical region, which has become even more significantly more hyper insecure region. It has become significantly more dangerous region thanks to the ill-advised, reckless, illegal, and lawless Israeli-US intervention in Iran. There's no other way to describe what is going on against Iran. The consequences are going to be very severe for the region and in particular for Armenia. What we're seeing is, I think, the advancements of schemes to collapse, fragment the Iranian state, create chaos, civil war, and not regime change. If there is to be a regime change in Iran, it would not be a less anti-Western regime, not a pro-Western regime. It is most likely, if there is any regime change, it would be even more radical regime in Iran. What does this mean? The economic impact on Armenia already was described. Some others mentioned it. It's very obvious. I'm going to skip that. There is a possible inflow of refugees to Armenia from Iran, and not just Armenian refugees, but Iranian refugees writ large. But there is a greater risk of refugee flows from Iran to Turkey and possibly Azerbaijan. Now let's look at for a moment what happened to Turkey and how Turkey responded to refugee flows 10 years ago from Syria. You may recall 2.5 million refugees flowed into Turkey when the civil war broke out in Syria. What did Turkey do? Eventually, Turkey created a buffer zone in northern Syria and northeastern Syria to pursue three aims. One, to assist the rebel groups in Syria. Two, more importantly for Turkey, to prevent a further refugee flow, Syrian refugee flow into Turkey. And three, most importantly, to prevent any establishment of a Kurdish autonomous region in northern Turkey. David knows very well what I'm talking about. We've worked on these issues in Syria together in from different organizations. Now, what if the Kurds in Iran pick up arms and try to establish an autonomous region in eastern and northwestern and western Iran? Is it possible that Turkey would repeat the same scenario as it did in northern Syria, establishing a buffer zone in Iran to prevent the Kurdish ambitions and also to prevent the flow of refugees into Turkey, and so that the Iranian refugees would take refuge within Iran in the Turkish protected area? And what does this mean for Armenia if such a scenario becomes a reality? I think we need to very, very seriously consider this risk. There's another risk. Some pundits are predicting that next on Israel's crosshairs will be Turkey. How? I don't know. But there is this conversation going on among experts out there in the open. Obviously, coexistence with neighbors and good relations with neighbors in this kind of an atmosphere becomes multiple times more important than it has been prior to this development in Iran. And I agree with Nerses with his assessment of TRIP and how important TRIP is for Armenia and the region, in general, but in particular also for Armenia. However, the TRIP has very significant gaps, and those who want the TRIP to be successful have to take this into consideration. The sooner they do, the better would be for the success of TRIP. One of the gaps already mentioned, I think Stephan just mentioned it, and that is the reciprocal rights for Armenia to have access to routes through unimpeded routes through Azerbaijan to other third countries. There's no mention of it in the further details that have been published on the TRIP agreement. Yes, Azerbaijan has allowed a few shipments of oil and wheat to come to Armenia through Azerbaijan, but the reciprocal rights of Armenia cannot depend solely on Azerbaijan's voluntary opening of borders once in a while for Armenia to receive goods. It has to be part of an agreement, a binding agreement on Azerbaijan, just like TRIP is a binding agreement, is about to become a binding agreement on Armenia. Equally, the peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia is flawed, as already Stephan referenced in detail. I won't go into the detail, but 2 points that have not been mentioned that need to be mentioned. In 35 years of conflict resolution, I have yet to see a peace agreement work, and work not just between elites by signing a piece of paper, but work between the peoples of two countries when there are outstanding, in particular outstanding emotive issues between those two peoples. The hostages, the 19 hostages in Baku, are such an issue that have spoiled so far and can spoil further any possible peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Equally, the 240-kilometer territory, parts of the Armenian territory that Azerbaijan has taken over, has to be resolved, has to be in the front room discussions when developing this issue. On the second point, the national security for Armenia, I don't want to spend too much time except to say that yes, some measures have been taken in the right directions, but there are major gaps in Armenia's national security, in particular the defense planning and doctrine across command methodologies inherited from the Soviet era, transition from the 20th to 21st century warfare capacity, intelligence capacity deficit, strategic security alliances deficit for Armenia. Somebody mentioned Armenia does not have a single strategic alliance for security guarantees. And finally, civil preparedness in Armenia. I want to move on to the third point since we're short of time, and that is state institution. The building of robust state institutions in Armenia. Here too, we have made progress, but we also have regressed, unfortunately. In the first place, we have a serious constitutional problem with the 2015 constitution, which has created an unchallenged executive and a compliant legislature that is allowing the executive power in the person of the prime minister to take arbitrary actions. This is not healthy. This I say with pain, really, in my heart, that Armenian constitution and institutional habits have to be modified. According to credible human rights non-governmental organizations, including Freedom House, Human Rights Watch, Human Rights House Foundation, Amnesty International, etc., there are persistent concerns in Armenia's democratic credentials and human rights record. Judicial independence is jeopardized. Judicial decision-making is motivated by political considerations. State surveillance of citizens is out there. Police abuse. Excessive use of pretrial detention is out there. And please don't tell me that there are hybrid risks against Armenia, and that justifies this measure. It does not. It cannot justify. And what is of concern to me is also that the West, which was so jealous about creating democracy in Armenia suddenly is quiet, does not raise a boo about the abuses of human rights in Armenia. On the positive side, however, civil society in Armenia is very, very active, perhaps the most active that it has been, but they operate in an atmosphere of public fatigue, polarization, disinformation, self-censorship, and funding constraints. We have to keep this in mind about this positive development and try to find remedies. Another positive element is the freedom of the media and expression in Armenia, even for diaspora Armenians. If I go to Armenia, when I go to Armenia, I freely discuss and criticize the government. No consequences so far, and I hope it stays that way. I'm almost done. The Armenian government's organized attack on the church is also a very, very sad and damaging development. And this is not to say this church is innocent in this. The church also has a part in it. So what we see now is that Armenia is entering an electoral period in a very, very highly polarized environment. To conclude, just one sentence. When we most need cohesion and unity to confront the exponentially higher risks around us and within Armenia, we are unfortunately divided, it seems hopelessly, and don't see any effort by the government, the opposition, or others, or the international community in Armenia and in diaspora to find a minimum common ground, a common denominator to improve Armenia's and our resiliency to confront this very, very difficult period that is ahead of us. Thank you.
Well, Hriar, thank you for those comments, and thank you very much for all the participants. There's a whole lot to absorb. Let me repeat, this has all been recorded. Hagop will be sending it out, and you can spread it around. It will go to the whole ARPA community, but then you can take yours and then spread it to your network. For our next thing on follow on to this, as I mentioned at the beginning, let me just say it will be a simulation session. So we're going to convene the team, and we're going to go through 3 scenarios and a panel, tabletop exercise. So those bring out a whole new insights. So we have 3 scenarios. Let me set them. We're going to keep thinking about them, by the way. This is not final. But the 3 proposed scenarios. One is Russian interference in upcoming Armenian elections. Second, impact of Iranian conflict on Armenia and the South Caucasus. And the third, evolution of Armenia-Azerbaijan relations through 2028 and beyond. We'll take half an hour for each, go around the table with all the participants, and each will represent the country of they're representing and say what would that country do in relation to this. Now, we have done this for the Armenian Virtual College 2-3 years ago, and I think Yervant is online. Yervant, are you still with us? Yervant?
Yes, I am here. Yes.
Okay, Yervant, I discussed this with you. Can you quickly tell everybody how this will be useful to you, and you will go on the Armenian Virtual College as a new. So would you like to take a minute or two? And
yes, I can take a minute to remind ourselves that several years ago, 3 years or so, with Hrair's help, we created a particular online course which is posted on the Armenian Virtual College platform. That online course is about scenario planning, is about strategic planning based on scenarios. And we did simulations at the time. So it has a component, a theoretical component, the course material itself, how strategic planning is done. And Alison and Hriar participated in creating the theoretical part, but also the simulation that goes with it. And the simulation was done 3 years back, of course, the conditions, the situation was quite different at that time. That's why the intent is to keep the course alive. We had many participants of the course from Armenia, from diaspora, from the government, independents. So I think by having an up-to-date simulation with today's situation, it can be very helpful. So I think this next step that Hrair kindly is describing would be an up-to-date simulation scenarios that will be supporting the course. So it will be theory and practice. And the course will be available also. We can talk about that at some point if you want on how to access it and how to participate in it.
Well, Yervan, thank you very much. If anybody has any suggestions for scenarios along the lines that Yervan just explained, please drop me a note or drop a note to Yervan, and we will definitely consider it. I think Dr. Scott Fisher. Scott, are you online with us? Scott?
Yes, sir. Here I am.
Yeah, Dr. Scott does this for a living, and he will be moderating this. Scott, you want to say a few words about how you're thinking of doing this?
To kind of how you gentlemen have outlined it would be the intent, though with perhaps more walls in place in terms of time limits. Just to keep it, those are 3 gigantic topics, and to get through those 3 topics in a half hour each, we'll have to be pretty careful about our time limits per speaker.
Yeah. Okay, so that would happen in a few weeks. And again, if you have suggestions, please send them to me. We will have to debate them with the participants and kind of converge. But these are the 3 ideas that have popped up. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. But can each of the participants, if you want to take a 10, 15 seconds, whatever, half a minute, quarter minute, just closing remarks. So let me start with David. Any closing remark, David?
I just want to say one point. Hrair said there's no any effort to try to think from different perspectives on our future. For me, our discussion itself is already the attempt, because as participants or noticed, I mean, we hold different perspectives on Armenia, on Armenian government, on Armenian future, but we talk and we listen to each other. And if we can try to bring some similar culture beyond these limits of this group to different worlds of Armenians, I think this is an effort worth trying. And based on some strategic scenario planning and elaborating into some more practical steps, I think it would be the right step for the right time. Thank you.
Nerses, quick closing remarks?
Sure, 2 quick comments. I agree that when we talk about the peace process, we're talking about negative peace and not positive peace. And negative peace basically means no shooting or violence on the borders, and positive peace basically means a comprehensive peace that's bottom line and bottom up and incorporates all of societies. You don't have that because Azerbaijan does not have a civil society. And so best case scenario for Armenia is no war. Therefore, we're talking about negative peace. So this is very important to keep in mind, that we cannot basically find ourselves in a domain of idealism, having expectations that you're not going to get from a predatory neighbor. Second, I think there were some excellent points made about Armenia's institutional underdevelopment. Armenia is a developing transitional democracy. Armenia is not a consolidated democracy. So thus, a lot of the problems that we see is the issue of underdeveloped institutions. These cannot be fixed overnight, and generally the trajectory suggests a much longer term. So in that context, when we see underdevelopment on behalf of state institutions, this does slow down the process. Also in Armenia, we have a problem with political culture. So I know that a lot of us in the West, when we make comparisons, we have these expectations on rhetoric, on polarization, on state performance, because we come from developed democracies. Armenia is an underdeveloped transitional democracy that is seeking consolidation within a security crisis. So these are important things to take into consideration. But definitely, I agree that structurally, and this is part of this process, is that you do have a super prime ministerial system that was designed in 2015 regime passed in 2016. And that system in of itself is conducive to a lot of the problems. But that also is a very important indicator in that seeing that Armenia's democratic trajectory still remains positive amidst all the stuff that we are seeing. And so, yes, the hybrid threats, the hybrid attacks against democracy are being used to erode democracy. You don't fight that by violating democracy. But the fundamental problem we all know is capacity. Underdeveloped state institutions cannot perform at the level that we expect. And this is kind of one of the issues of consolidation. I'll stop here.
Well, thank you, Nerses. Alexander, quick closing remarks. You're muted. No? You're muted, Alexander. I can't hear you.
Muted.
I just had technical problems and I couldn't listen to you last 10 minutes. No, can you listen to me?
Yes.
Do you want to make any closing remarks very quickly?
Closing remarks.
Alexander, if you don't have any, that's okay. We're doing this very rapidly.
I haven't listened last 10 minutes, so
You're
maybe
good.
next time. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Anna, are you still with us? I know it's, oh, you're with us, Anna. Any closing
Yes,
remarks?
I have checked out, changed my place, but I'm with you. I will try to answer to a question when, during my closing remarks. When it comes to the likelihood of disintegration of Iran, I can't say that we have a high probability, high risk of it. But again, in all cases, having less risk of something dangerous doesn't mean that we must exclude overall this kind of issue, especially in this context. And Kurdish issue can be played by also out powers. It is there is a risk of disintegration. Why I have contra arguments against it? It's because I don't think that disintegration of Iran is in the interest of USA, because for Washington, I guess it will be important to have a balance in the region for Turkey. And second, even for Turkey and for other countries also, it's not in their interest, because if disintegration of Iran will happen nowadays, especially if it will happen via hands of Turkish people, Kurdish people, it will have a big security implications also for Turkey itself. So that's why even Turkey in these days isn't interested in the disintegration of Iran. When it comes to the threat of refugee issues, in my other articles, I refer to this security threat, because we have a situation when in the northern borders of Iran, Turkey has massive political but also economic interests not to allow refugees to enter Turkish territory, and Azerbaijan has still closed borders because of, as they are explaining, a COVID issue. And so for the refugees living in the northern part of Iran, the main entrance would be Armenia, and it will create several layers of security implications for Armenia, both humanitarian, but also in context, it will be very difficult to monitor, are these all people refugees or also some kind of individuals who will pretend to be just coming from Iran. And I wanted also to mention that the most dangerous security concern for Armenia is prolonged war in Iran. So whatever will be happening in Iran, Armenia can still find ways to deal with new kind of foreign policy approach of Iran, new kind of political transformation of Iran. But prolonged war it creates more and more security implications. And speaking the truth, of course, I'm happy that in this context we have less security concerns we could have if not the August 8, but I don't understand public showing or coming from the political actors saying we are a heaven, we are a peace, a crossroad of peace when the war is in the region. I can't understand this kind of positive approach, if I may use that word. So I still see plenty of security challenges for Armenia, and the best scenario, of course, will be ending the war and preserving territorial integrity of Iran.
Well, Anna, thank you. And by the way, Anna, if you would like, the article you had sent me, I read it, 2 weeks ago now. If you want that, you can send it to Hagop and he will post it on the ARPA website so everybody can get to see it. So that's up to you.
Okay.
Okay.
With pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we lost Stephan. Stephan, you're not with us. It's very late for you at Yerevan. We can understand. Hrair, any closing remarks from your end?
Yeah, just one point. Look, I don't think Armenia's deficit in institutions, democracy, and constitutional concept is due to a developing democracy issue. I think we won't do favors for Armenia if we ascribe this only to a developing country issue. Not criticizing violations simply will dig Armenia deeper into the hole. We need to be vigilant. We need to constructively criticize the country for its deficits so that we can all hold hands and improve those, built on those institutions, democracy, and the constitution. We got a lot of work to do to improve Armenia's deficit in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Hrair. There's a quick question in here. Anna, if you could address it, let me read it. From Al Esayan. Al is asking, what are the likelihood, you addressed some of this, Anna.
Yeah, I was addressing these questions.
Yeah, of this, and what are the probability of massive number of millions of refugees arriving to Armenia as a result?
So I tried to refer to these questions when speaking with my final remarks. Yeah.
Anybody else wants to say anything about that topic?
If I may, Hriar, I think just same question from Al. I think I was trying to remember in the last 30 years, how many countries got disintegrated. I think Somalia is the worst example. And I spent 4 years in Somalia. And it took 20 years for them to get disintegrated. And another 15 years, now they are building it back. And then there is Sudan, South Sudan, another 20 years of internal war, etc. Plus Ethiopia, Eritrea, 3 cases only. So my point here is that if Americans will continue bombing and fighting and arming Kurds, arming Baluchis, arming whomever for the next many years, it may get to the point of Somalia or Afghanistan or so. If they stop in the next couple of weeks, I mean, the way Trump was promising 4 weeks, now he's speaking about September, it may become too difficult to manage. It may become Vietnam's or Afghanistan's. Even Iraq did not get disintegrated. The Kurds in Iraq, they declared independence. It was not accepted. They broke the state system. The ugly, the horrible Saddam Hussein system, statehood was destroyed. But then what came out is, again, state of Iraq with some autonomy for the Kurds. So I'm hopeful that since there are no any example, and Somalia is like extreme case, it will not be disintegrated, but we'll see.
Syria is another example.
Yes, good point. As formally existing as Syria.
David, you're talking about formal disintegration, like in Sudan, but Libya is not formal, but it's not really functional state now. Syria is not really, it was disintegrated. So you have examples that you have in in our country,
But
close to
Syria
our country.
came to the point after 10 years of civil war, and still Syria today is Syria. I mean, Kurds were forced to get back to the central government, and there are parts in the northwest which are controlled by Turkey, but hopefully it will come back. So Syria, I can't say this is disintegrated. It has a chance. But my point is that if you keep bombing the country for 10 years or more, you may get to disintegration. But if it is like few weeks, few months or whatever, it may not necessarily get to that depth of, let's say, collapse of society. And Somalis, again, the worst case, because there is Somaliland, there is Puntland, there are many other lands. So still we are collecting pieces together.
If I may, very shortly,
Go ahead, Anna.
one argument and one contra-argument. So argument against the disintegration of Iran could be that Iran and other countries, Mr. Akopyan and others mentioned, for more than 2 centuries, more or less, had the same territory, the same territorial integrity. And also national minorities have their own Iranian identity also. But also a contra-argument. It can be not the disintegration based on the national minorities, but having different centers of political decision-making. So even today, in recent days, Foreign Minister of Iran several times during his interviews said expression like, as I know, if I'm informed correctly, and sentences like this. So I don't exclude the possibility that IRC from one hand and other political powers, and especially the office of the government itself, from the other hand, can have different territories where they can have power to when it comes to dealing with the foreign policy and also internally. So not excluding the possibility of disintegration, but I guess the quality of that could be quite different than in other countries of the Middle East.
Absolutely, I would agree. I was born in the country which was disintegrated without war, Soviet Union, I mean. Now it's not exists, so you can imagine such kind of scenarios.
All right, I think we should conclude.
I know. I just want one very quick example for you from my experience. Let me quickly state it. I was working the Iraq war before it started. I was in the Pentagon working day and night, getting ready. I was wet behind the ears, didn't know what was going to happen. And we were at a meeting, and a retired general was in the room. And during the lunch break, he stood up. He says, "Guys, I grant you, we will be in Baghdad in 24 hours. Then what do we do?" So these things are very, very unpredictable. Some people can see through it, and others ignore predictions. But this was very useful discussion today.
This is what Anna said about Inshallah strategy, right? This is not the first time.
I was quoting Ali Baez.
Very well.
Yeah.
I think we're done. It's very good. I'll work with Scott and Yermont. We'll do the simulation, and I'll close the loop with you. Make sure you're all comfortable with it, and then we'll proceed with it. Okay, Hagop, we're done.
Thank you very much, Hrair, and thank you very much, really expert speakers, for this very exciting and very informative discussion. We are going to have another panel discussion next month on language in the digital age, artificial intelligence and social media versus speech and identity. That's going to be very interesting, so please join us. And as you know, ARPA works in Armenia by donations. So please donate so we can do more work. And thank you very much. Hope to see you next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.